So people often worry about how to give their students value for money.
They do. It's that feeling. It comes from an insecurity, really. It's like, who am I to teach? How do I make sure that students feel that they're not wasting their money with me? And you can understand why people feel nervous about this. I think what's really important to understand is that everyone kind of finds value in different ways from their teachers. And
Can you think of any examples?
I mean, I've got so many. I mean, I remember one student I had in Japan. It was a one-to-one student, and I don't remember how we met in the first place. But I would go to his office, and he was a guy who he was quite rich. I think he'd sold a company, and he wanted to improve his English. So I went there, and he told me in advance, I want to learn to talk about all these different things, improve my English, etc., etc. Turns out all he wanted to do was talk about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was his idol, and he would I'd come to the lesson and he would have these speeches of Steve Jobs, and he would want to stand in a corner and read these speeches aloud to me, and I would just kind of help him. But that's what he loved.
Yeah, I had an Italian guy in Malta I was teaching there who only wanted to talk about Woody Allen.
Right.
Woody Allen and his films, and that was it.
That was
Nothing
his- that
else. He
was
was
his
very
thing.
clear that's all he wanted to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many examples. I remember when I lived in Qatar in the Middle East, I used to actually teach a sheikh one-to-one, and he told me in advance of the lesson, yeah, Ollie, I want to pass the GMAT, which is an English exam for MBA. So if you want to do an MBA, you have to pass the GMAT.
First, yeah.
And because he didn't. He was a fairly. He didn't actually have to work. He was a very well placed person in the goal. But I think he just felt like he wanted to do an MBA for whatever reason.
Why not?
And so he was very clear about that. But when I got there, all he wanted to do was sort of sit back and drink his Arabic coffee and just chat about just the world.
Yeah.
And I would say, should
Yeah.
we do some work on the GMAT? Later. He just liked having me there.
Yeah, I had a very interesting one. I mean, it was a Spanish guy. I think he was from Madrid, and he was a tour guide. And I think we had about 5 lessons a week, 1 hour or 2 hours. And all we did, well, I mean, he was a tour guide, and he wanted to practice, sort of describing the sites. But, we were in my living room or whatever. So I had all these flashcards, and I would show him a flashcard of a site, and he would describe it. And that was it, for 2 hours a day.
Right. I guess the point here is not to say that students will just want to learn any old random thing,
No.
but rather it's to say that every student has a different sense of what they actually, there's what they say, and then there's actually how they get value from the lesson.
Absolutely.
And so on CEOT, then how do we manage it? How do we train people to know how to deliver that value?
So one of the things we'll talk about is a needs analysis, where you really find out what your student wants and why they need the language. And then, how can you plan for that, and how can you choose or design materials that will really cater to that student?
And one of the things that we often talk about this, but the value that you're bringing to a student is not limited to the 4 walls of the lesson time, and what where so much of the progress a student's going to make is outside the lesson. And so setting things to do outside the lesson ensures that the learning continues outside the classroom, and that also represents value for money, because what the teacher's doing for this, what you're giving the student, then, okay, yeah, it is the lesson time, but it's also the structure that you give them to then go off and do their homework outside, and all of these things together are going to really ensure that you are giving value for money for the student, and that they feel like they're getting that as well.